Intern U.S. attorney fires more than 24 January 6 prosecutors in D.C. The Trump administration dismisses former Capitol riot prosecutors recently hired to permanent positions and still under probationary period. This, in my opinion, is good. But we're going to go ahead and read on. The Washington Post is reporting interim U.S. Attorney Ed Martin on Friday announced the dismissal of roughly 30 federal prosecutors who worked on Capitol riot cases in the Washington D.C. office over the past 4 years. Two people familiar with the matter said Friday. The employees were hired to permanent career positions after serving under special or short-term status as the office surged to manage nearly 1,600 prosecutions after the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. The prosecutors remained under probationary status, which allowed the firings without recourse under Justice Department policy, the People said. So today on the Culture War, we had three people that were pardoned and one person whose sentence was commuted. It was the QAnon shaman. I forget the guy. I don't want to misrep or I don't want to get the name.
Shout out to Jacob Chansley, the QAnon shaman. I love the man.
Jacob was great. We had Nick Ox, who was a Proud Boy, Stuart Rhodes, Jay Johnson, and Jacob Chansley. So Jay Johnson was actually, he was on Bob's Burgers for a while, and he basically comes from Hollywood, and he got wrapped up, and to me, it seems like he was the one that was most likely to have been just in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was Stewart was the guy from Oath Keepers, and he was
like
there,
the leader of the Oath Keepers.
Yeah, and he was there. He's the one who had his sentence commuted, but he's still considered guilty of the crimes. I think he was going to get like 20 years or a long time. But they were all saying, look, the prosecutors essentially were doing things that were illegal. They were not. It was not a fair. None of them felt like they had a fair trial. The entire jury was all out of D.C. They felt like if those trials were held anywhere other than D.C., they would have gotten a fair trial. The judge was biased. The judges were all biased. Jacob Chansley, if I understand correctly, he didn't do anything violent. Right. And there's plenty of video of Jake. You can't miss the guy on January 6th. I mean, the QAnon shaman went on to, people were actually, Jay had worn a QAnon shaman Halloween costume after it happened the following Halloween. And that was part of the reason why he got such a bad outcome with the court. They were like, you can't be sorry if you're dressed like that. You think it's a joke. I mean, never mind, the guy's a comedian, right? He's a voice actor and a comedian in Bob's Burgers and stuff. But I mean, I understand why, not that I agree, but I understand why the Oath Keepers got looked at the way they did, why the Proud Boys got looked at the way they did, and why Jacob was looked at the way he did. But when it comes to Jay, I mean, he was treated really, really badly for like no reason. And that's my understanding is out of all of the people that were arrested, now all these guys did some time Jay didn't, but all the other guys did some time in solitary confinement. Some of them did long stints in solitary confinement, which is like torture. I mean, solitary confinement is where the worst of the worst go. The people that are violent to other inmates, people that are a threat to other inmates, people that are a threat to themselves, and none of these guys were that. Even if you have a distaste for the Proud Boys, Nick was not that guy. He was there literally doing. He was just being a journalist, right? I think it was. I forget the name of his group. It was something about the wiki, like I don't know, might have been Murder the Media or something like that. So it wasn't helping his case. The name wasn't helping his case. Yeah, but he was there. He wasn't involved in any of the fights with police or anything. It's just that he was a Proud Boy, and the government was intent on making the Proud Boys out to be an example. The same thing with the Oath Keepers.
So most of these people had their due
Yeah.
process. They were not given due process most of the time anyways, right?
Yeah.
So these prosecutors were hired specifically to handle these cases and were kept on in a probationary phase. That's why they're allowed to be fired witred without any sort of
if I understand
hearings or
correctly,
anything.
yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know what their history was leading up to this. But, if these guys were hired specifically to prosecute J6 people, I imagine that the argument that the directive that they got was, look, these people are guilty. We all know these people are guilty. And essentially the court cases, the actual trials are kind of just for show. That's the way
kangaroo court.
Yeah, it essentially, that's the way that it sounds like, especially when they articulate it. And again, I understand there are people that were here this morning that a person that is not sympathetic to the J6ers at all, they wouldn't be sympathetic to their plights, except for, like I said, Jay Johnson. He was there. He felt like it was a boring day. He said that he felt like there wasn't much going on. It was mostly people just milling about until the tear gas started, and then he was trying to get out of there. But I don't remember. I don't recall if he actually went into the Capitol or not. But the way they described the people that were in the Capitol, there was no violence in the Capitol. And upon hearing that, it did make me think. I really didn't see any of the closed caption footage where there was fighting inside. All of the fighting that I saw with police was outside.
There's that Ashley Babbitt situation inside.
Yes.
They were trying to climb over a window to get into the inner sanctum or whatever.
Yeah.
Broke a window.
Yeah.
And then the cops opened fire at the broken window.
That was one shot. And that wasn't attacking police. She was trying to climb through a window. Now, granted, she was trying to go somewhere she shouldn't have been.
I think somebody broke the window before they tried to climb through.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a broken window that she was trying to climb through. And on the other side, there were still Congress people. So that was the justification for opening fire. I think that he shouldn't have, but that's what the story would be. But there was no fighting with police inside, so. I mean, I do think that it's a good thing that these people are fired.
Less government is never going to be, less people employed by the government will never be a bad thing, ever.
I mean,
unless they're air traffic controllers.
Air traffic controllers could be done privately. I think that's probably
less lawyers, never a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, do you have a take on it, Mike?
I mean, I will admit I am very, very behind on a lot of this stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is just really I'd be more interested in the actual symptoms of this. This is just I think a lot of people on the left wanted this to happen to the J6ers. They were angry. They feel like they won the 2020 election, and then when they saw this, the way the media blew out of proportion, they wanted justice, and they wanted these people to pay because they keep calling it an insurrection. They were trying to destroy our democracy. And so it just enabled the people in power to really just throw the books at them in every way they can because, again, it's, as I was talking about earlier, this tribalism stuff just comes up. And with declining religiosity, your political side becomes the new god. These insurrectionists, in the eyes of people on the left, were going after
heretics, blasphemers.
They're heretics, they're blasphemers. They were going after their victory in their political religiosity, and that was considered sacrilegious.
Do you remember where you were and your own personal context on January 6th? What were you doing? Do you remember hearing about it?
Reading a book in my home in Tucson, just minding my own business. And then I saw the news. I was like, what it made me think of is a lot of leftists were rioting in cities around the country. Now the right is just doing it. Okay, well, yeah, they're angry that Trump didn't win. I mean, this is what they're going to do. And then I just sort of went back to reading. And then I saw it constantly getting blown out of proportion. Now, again, I'm a layman in this. This is really not an area I've studied a lot, but it just seemed like, I was like, does this really need to be dragged on and on? We're going back to J6 like it's Pearl Harbor, for crying out loud. And it didn't really seem like it was that big a deal. And as just an average American who's more interested in other topics, I was like, can we just move on? Yeah. I'd much rather talk about inflation or if Biden is really there and what's going to happen in the midterms. But no, everyone's going back to J6. And I feel like a lot of average Americans were just over it in a few months. And they were sort of mad at a lot of, I heard from people on the left that said, can we just move on? But
only the most politically indoctrinated were the ones that were the most affected by this story.
Well, I'm interested in actually hearing both of your takes on that. Like, where were you guys on J6. Did you work here? Were you?
It was before I worked here.
Okay. What about you, Ian?
Yeah, we had actually talked about maybe going down on like the 4th. We were like, should we go down and do a show from DC on the 6th? And then we were like, no, sounds like a bad idea. It just doesn't seem like a good vibe right now. So we ended up, we were just home.
It was funny. So for me, look, even doing this show, I'm not the most political person. Certainly most of my social media, you wouldn't see that. And I had friends, or what used to be friends, who reached out to me and wrote very long messages about the evils of this event, even though I had not said anything about it, nor did I really care about it in any way, shape, or form. I was out skating when this happened and had no idea what was going on until I got home that day, and lost friends over this event where I had to read like 12-page diatribes about why I was a bad person because I did not, I guess, call this out despite the fact that I had nothing to do with it, nor talk to them at all about my political beliefs. If they said I voted for someone, they certainly didn't hear that from me, so they wouldn't have noted anyways. But for the people who are the most politically indoctrinated, the lack of speaking is sometimes worse because they believe that silence is violence, and they will take anything you don't say as a crime as well. And that was probably one of the bigger awakenings for me at that moment, that it's not just going to affect other people, it's also possibly going to affect you as well. And it was shocking to me because, look, this is also one of those cases where you have to do a ton of research if you want to refute them and talk about it as well. Like if I have to talk to them now and point them out and say, when you talk about how many police officers died on January 6th and you don't acknowledge that they were suicides after the fact, and one of them was
zero that died
I said
on
that there was 0 on January 6th. I said, I don't have any interest in debating this with you. I don't care. To me, whatever my friends believe politically never mattered to me. It's never been an issue for me to have friends on all sides of the aisle. I still consider myself, for the most part, a fairly liberal person, and it never mattered to me. And to see people who probably agree with me on a fair amount of things still end 20-year friendships over something like this that had nothing to do with them, they weren't there, had nothing to do with me, I wasn't there. This was, I guess, maybe post-COVID as another, issue for, there was COVID, there was George Floyd, and then there was this, and there was all of these events that primed the American people to just start hating each other. And certainly, I guess maybe it's like a game of whack-a-mole. Eventually, one of them was going to get to me, despite the fact that I didn't have anything to say about any of it, and that's sad. It really is.
It goes back to that religious fervor thing.
Yeah.
Silence is violence.
Yeah.
If you don't participate in ancients, if you don't participate in the rain dance, the gods are going to be mad and they're not going to send rain. It's a similar psychological phenomenon where you have to participate. I mean, when St. Augustine was around, a lot of the pagans were blaming the collapse of the Western Roman Empire on Christianity because the gods are now mad. And he wrote City of God to refute that and say that's just not the way the world works. So the same kind of stuff is happening. It's just carried on into new modern fervor, I guess.
I had to point out, I said, look, did you care when people entered the chambers when Brett Kavanaugh was being confirmed? You don't know about that? Here, let me tell you about what was going on when Brett Kavanaugh was going to be confirmed, because there was plenty of people, and this happens in local governments all the time, especially when leftists and leftist groups dislike something that's going on in the government. They feel emboldened to be able to protest because they understand that the legacy media will never frame them in the way that the legacy media framed the Donald Trump supporters when this happened. So it emboldens them to go out and continue to act that way because they know they're not going to face any repercussions for it.
Yeah, we were talking about that this morning, and that was kind of everyone's sense that, like, especially again, I keep referring to Jay because Jay was the kind of the most normie guy that kind of got swept up in it. Like everyone else was, politically active. I mean, even the QAnon shaman, Jacob, he's very politically active, very politically aware, shares a lot of the sentiments about what the left is doing in the United States and stuff. And Jay was, very much an LA normie. And when this stuff happened, he was kind of shocked because he went from being a dude that would get parts and get jobs. And after that, all of his work dried up. He lost his job. His agent fired him, or quit on him and stuff. And that, as someone that comes from the music industry, I didn't experience that same thing because I was already persona non grata, almost 7-8 years prior to this, because I was one of the people that would say, no, it's important that we have free speech. It's important that we are able to, we should listen to people like Milo Yiannopoulos and Ben Shapiro talk, because even if you don't like them, that what they say might, inspire a good dialogue. And the response from people in the music industry was like, no, we should punch Nazis. And it's like,
I'm
and there were
surprised.
people that I was friends with that I would have assumed were liberals, right? They would have probably called me a libertarian, maybe a conservative libertarian, and I would have called them liberals. And then these people were saying, no, we should punch Nazis like Milo and punch Nazis like Ben Shapiro. And I'm like, Ben Shapiro is Jewish. Like this doesn't make sense to me. And so I outed myself very early when woke came around as someone that wasn't going to play along. And so that there was a lot of that. I started losing friends long before, the January 6th stuff. But I understood what he was going through because he was just like, oh, this all was dropped in my lap. And for some reason, now everyone looks at me like I'm persona non grata. And I was even getting, as someone that everyone knew, I was on Twitter just memeing the whole thing all day long. I was sharing what's the Mars Attacks meme where the old lady stands up, hey, they blew up the Capitol, and I'm sending that meme out and laughing about it and making jokes about the riot, because it was also my sense that we had just gone through a year of violence, night after night after night after night, protests and Kenosha, and there was all the stuff that happened in D.C. and the May 29th attack on the White House and all that stuff. And so from my estimation, it was like, oh, just another riot that happens. When Donald Trump was elected, there was riots. They burnt that guy's limo. They were smashing up D.C. And so I didn't get the sense that this was some big deal. But some of the people that I knew, that I'm not going to name them, but they were, sending very accusatory tweets. Where were you, Phil? I'm like, I was in New Hampshire. Like, I'm tweeting from my office. And they're like, well, do you think it was okay? And I'm like, well, I mean, it wasn't okay, but neither was all the other riots. Like, it was just a riot. Like, and as far as I was concerned, there was never a time where Pence was actually going to do what the few Trump supporters that were hoping he would not certify. There was never a time that was going to happen. It was absolutely ridiculous from as soon as the idea was presented that maybe it was an insurrection, that maybe Donald Trump was trying to take the presidency. I was like, there is no way on earth that any other outcome is going to happen aside from Joe Biden will be the president. He will get, they will confirm that all the votes are there. There is no world in which that doesn't happen. And to even present the idea is so ridiculous that I can't take you serious. And then that's what the Democrats did with the whole, first I was thinking it was a riot. Then it's like an insurrection and blah, 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 blah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.